What happens when a discarded noble discovers the gods have marked his path? His family sends him toward certain death, unaware they have created their own executioner. 3 days earlier, a man from Earth awakens inside the body of Field Rose. His original name is Chin Hao, but that identity now belongs to another world. Field is the eldest son of Count Rose, though nobody treats him like an heir. His black hair and dark eyes reveal his mother was a foreign enslaved maid. That bloodline makes him an embarrassment among relatives obsessed with status and appearance. Worse, the original Field possessed a kindness that noble society interpreted as weakness. He surrendered his combat awakening potion so his younger brother could gain power. He also gave his sister the academy position that should have secured his future. Field donated money freely, treated servants gently, and never fought back against humiliation. His family answered every sacrifice with contempt, mockery, and increasingly open cruelty. Count Rose now sits before him looking pale, exhausted, and strangely lifeless. The Count speaks grandly about adulthood responsibility and a lion leaving its pride. Everyone inside the chamber understands the truth behind those polished words. Field is being expelled. His stepmother controls the decision while wearing a smile sharpened by quiet satisfaction. She announces that Field will govern Nightfall Domain in the distant northern province. On official maps, the territory appears enormous, valuable, and worthy of a noble heir. In reality, Nightfall Domain is a poisoned graveyard abandoned by the entire empire. 10 years ago, Imperial forces released corrupting fog across the northern Beastmen lands. The attacks slaughtered 300,000 inhabitants and contaminated everything that survived. Humans, animals, and plants twisted into creatures driven by hunger and corruption. 3 Imperial expeditions later attempted to reclaim the North and none returned alive. Even fugitives facing execution refused to hide within that gray wasteland. Nightfall exists as territory only because nobody has survived long enough to rule it. Field requests soldiers, supplies, and enough money to establish a defensible settlement. His stepmother rejects every reasonable demand before Count Rose can properly answer. She grants him 500 gold coins and permission to bring personal servants. That amount could support a journey, but never rebuild a corrupted province. Field recognizes the sentence immediately, yet he refuses to show fear before them. His half-brother approaches afterward, eager to enjoy one final private humiliation. The golden-haired young man mocks Field's foreign appearance and low-born maternal blood. Then his amusement turns darker as he mentions the woman Field once loved. She had flaxen hair and was found murdered behind a tavern. The original Field never recovered from her death or the questions surrounding it. His brother casually reveals that he personally arranged the girl's brutal killing. He describes the experience as thrilling, watching for Field's grief with delighted eyes. That confession explains why the original soul collapsed before Chin Hao awakened here. Rage had consumed the young noble until illness finally stopped his heart. Field keeps his expression controlled, though his fingernails pierce deeply into his palms. His brother claims the murder was revenge for the donated combat awakening potion. Despite using it, he never advanced into a first-rank combat knight. Rather than accept his poor talent, he convinced himself Field deliberately poisoned him. Jealousy hardened into hatred, and hatred demanded an innocent victim. The brother promises to repeat that cruelty against anyone Field loves in the future. Something inside the new Field finally breaks. His knee crashes into the young man's stomach and launches him backward. A second kick smashes across the brother's face, scattering blood over the polished floor. Every witness freezes because the obedient Field has never resisted anyone before. Field grabs the golden curls and prepares to drive his brother's skull downward. A hand suddenly locks around his throat. A wine-red-haired woman lifts him completely from the floor without visible effort. A glowing rune burns across her forehead while pressure crushes the air from his lungs. She is a god chosen, a woman carrying power granted directly by a deity. Only women can receive such blessings, and ordinary warriors cannot easily oppose them. His brother already commands one, revealing how far Field stands beneath his enemies. The woman throws him into a wall instead of obeying the demand to kill him. Stone strikes his back, blood fills his mouth, and pain flashes through his body. Still, Field rises without begging and walks away beneath their furious stares. He cannot defeat a god chosen today. However, he silently promises to return after building enough strength to destroy them. That confidence comes from an ability nobody else knows exists. Since awakening in this body, Field can see a mysterious map floating before him. A green marker moves across it, as though guiding him toward something important. Lords normally gain territorial talents by forming contracts with God-chosen women. The original Field possessed no gift contract army or meaningful political support. Qin Hao's arrival somehow awakened a rare innate talent inside the abandoned body. The green marker may be his only advantage, so he decides to follow it. His butler gathers the 500 gold coins and the remaining household servants. Their funeral-like expressions reveal how little faith they have in surviving the journey. Outside, 20 cavalrymen wait in mismatched armor beneath Captain Connor's command. They claim to be escorts, although their equipment and manners resemble roadside bandits. Field suspects their real assignment is ensuring he reaches the northern death zone. Before traveling north, he orders the column toward Golden Eagle City. The green marker is moving there, and he also desperately needs supplies. Golden Eagle is the second largest city controlled by the Rose family. Field's second sister receives 600,000 gold coins from it each year. Field has received less than 1,000th of that wealth for an entire territory. At the city, gate guards abuse common travelers until they recognize noble cavalry. They immediately clear the road and bow, proving rank still protects even unwanted nobles. Field follows the marker through crowded streets toward the city's northern district. The trail ends at a slave market reeking of waste, sweat, and rotting feed. People are packed into iron cages without privacy, clean water, or proper clothing. Whip scars cover their bodies while fear keeps their eyes lowered. Merchants surround Field because nobles are usually their richest and cruelest customers. One trader eagerly lists goblins, halflings, subhumans, beast folk, and other captives. He even displays an abused elf whose suffering is presented as a selling feature. Field feels sickened by how casually this society turns living people into merchandise. Then the green marker stops above a cage hidden near the market's corner. A white-haired wolf girl lies on the damp floor with watchful red eyes. Her ears remain lowered, but her gaze repeatedly measures the merchant's hanging keys. She appears exhausted rather than broken and dangerous despite her weakened condition. Field reaches toward her head before remembering this frightened woman is not a pet. She growls sharply, making Connor grip his sword and the butler step backward. The merchant demands 3 gold coins far beyond the normal subhuman price. Field exposes the inflated offer and negotiates through promises of future purchases. Eventually, he buys the wolf girl with 200 additional human and subhuman slaves. 120 of the captives are men capable of labor or future combat. The entire purchase costs 53 gold coins, including the merchant's blood-bound contract. According to that contract, deliberate disobedience can summon divine fire against the slaves. Field accepts the document while hiding his disgust behind a practical expression. Nightfall requires workers, defenders, builders, farmers, and people desperate enough to follow him. Yet the mysterious wolf girl may be worth more than every other purchase combined. Field has followed the first green marker, and his impossible rise quietly begins. His remaining money must cover food tools, horses, medicine, and fog-clearing lanterns. Those church-made lanterns are essential because ordinary people cannot survive northern corruption. Field sends his butler to request a loan from Golden Eagle's merchant guild. Every lender refuses the moment they hear his name. His second sister has ordered merchants to overcharge Field and deny all assistance. The conspiracy confirms that his exile is not punishment but an organized execution. The original Field left no savings because he donated nearly everything he earned. One portion supported the Rose treasury, while the remainder funded northern border defenses. His generosity enriched people who now celebrate his approaching death. With no alternative, Field spends 180 gold coins on essential supplies. He buys 17 weak horses, farming equipment books, and roughly 35 days of food. Mercenaries refuse him immediately after hearing the words Nightfall Domain. One advises him to abandon the empire rather than continue toward certain death. Field ignores the warning and rests at an inn before examining his unusual purchase. After bathing, the wolf girl looks completely different from the filthy captive he found. Her hair is snow white, her features delicate, and her posture cautiously graceful. Only her trembling ears and tail reveal the terror she is struggling to conceal. She has barely spoken for a month but eventually identifies herself as Ashina. The moment her name becomes known, the green marker above her disappears. A translucent status panel replaces it, visible only to Field. The panel identifies Ashina as an unawakened Wolf Cavalry God-chosen candidate. It also warns that malnutrition has brought her body close to collapse. Field realizes his map can locate potential God-chosen before official awakening tests. Kingdoms spend enormous resources testing eligible women because successful candidates are exceptionally rare. Golden Eagle City has produced only 3 God-chosen across an entire century. Field's ability may find them without ceremonies, institutions, or blind luck. For the first time, surviving nightfall seems possible rather than completely absurd. Ashina mistakes his excited pacing for preparation of some elaborate punishment. She has already decided to resist if he attempts to violate or torture her. Even the fatal slave contract seems preferable to another life without dignity. Field instead explains that she will help establish and defend his territory. Her suspicion remains because human nobles rarely treat subhumans as useful equals. Food succeeds where explanations fail. Ashina initially waits on the floor expecting scraps instead of a seat. Field pulls her toward the table and places a steak directly before her. One cautious bite becomes 3 steaks and 5 loaves devoured almost without breathing. Her swollen stomach and stunned expression reveal how long she has endured hunger. Field tells her that hard work will always be rewarded with proper meals. He then proposes training her in hopes of awakening divine power. Ashina considers the idea impossible because no known human lord contracts subhuman God-chosen. Field conceals the status panel and claims they will only learn through attempting it. She accepts the gamble after confirming that successful training includes regular meat. During 10 days of northern travel, he buys her food and magical supplements. Her strength gradually returns while trust cautiously replaces her constant expectation of abuse. Field also purchases lanterns, purification potions, and an expensive awakening crystal. As the road continues, he studies the reason every sibling wants him eliminated. Count Rose grows weaker daily, and imperial law divides his fortune among surviving children. Each dead heir increases the inheritance available to everyone remaining. Nightfall is therefore a convenient grave with no murderer left to punish. The expedition finally reaches Kashin Fortress, the last defense before the northern wasteland. Baron Bull controls its mountain walls, towers, siege weapons, and supposedly disciplined soldiers. The original Field donated heavily to nearby villages and even Baron Bull's private expenses. He expects that generosity to earn passage shelter or at least basic cooperation. Before reaching the gate, his map suddenly displays fast-moving red skull symbols. Captain Connor laughs at the warning because the fortress supposedly makes the area untouchable. He boasts that he will eat horse droppings if danger appears behind those defenses. Field quietly slows the slave wagons, leaving Connor's cavalry at the front. Minutes later, screaming refugees emerge with a horde of gray-eyed corpses behind them. Rot reaches the column before the creatures do thick enough to trigger gagging. Connor's riders form a line and charge downhill with leveled lances. Steel punches through rotten bodies, flinging purple blood across horses and armor. The cavalry circles with sabers and chain hammers while Field links carts into a barrier. He offers rewards to anyone willing to fight, but terrified slaves remain hidden. His butler wets himself and recommends abandoning every captive to save their own lives. Field refuses because people who flee this danger will never survive inside Nightfall. Ashina climbs from her wagon and stands before him with raised, trembling fists. She is frightened beyond concealment, yet still declares through actions that she will protect him. Several corpses escape the cavalry and slam mindlessly against the wooden cart wall. Field drives his sword through one neck and tears the blade sideways. The severed head folds against its chest as corrupted blood coats the timber. The smell nearly empties his stomach, but another feeling rises beneath the disgust. This body carries enough combat instinct to make battle strangely exhilarating. His confidence almost kills him when a half-bodied corpse crawls toward his ankle. Ashina pins it down with a manure fork before its teeth reach him. Field rewards her with 1 gold coin, making her red eyes shine brightly. Witnessing their resistance, several slaves seize farming tools and join the defense. The creatures prove dangerous mainly through numbers infection and complete absence of fear. Once trapped against the carts, their exposed heads become easy targets. After victory, Field orders every corpse decapitated and burned to prevent further contamination. The rescued villagers explain that death fog entered their settlement during the night. Most residents transformed while sleeping, leaving only a handful able to escape. Baron Bull and his god chosen have departed to investigate a mysterious cult. His son Richard currently commands the fortress and its remaining soldiers. When Field arrives, the outer defenses are completely abandoned. Soldiers crowd behind the inner walls while corpse creatures wander freely outside. Richard refuses to open the gate despite Field's title and years of donations. He also rejects the refugees and threatens to shoot them for approaching. The coward admits he expects Nightfall Domain to become a protective buffer for him. However, he promises never to open the fortress if Field later seeks refuge. Field finally understands that generosity without power purchases neither loyalty nor respect. He forces the abandoned villagers to join his expedition through calculated intimidation. Their terror eases Ashina because ruthless behavior fits her understanding of human nobility. Field's map then reveals Richard has lied about the northern gate being safe. Red Skulls cover the route Richard deliberately recommended. Yet abandoning the outer fortress has also left its weapons and supplies unguarded. Field decides cruelty should at least become expensive for those practicing it. Connor refuses to help clear the area and rides away after mocking Field's slaves. Field gathers 30 stronger captives and leads them into a concealed forest clearing. Ashina's status has changed from unawakened to ready for awakening. Field removes the costly crystal and places it carefully between her hands. Blue starlight erupts upward before forming the image of an elegant winter goddess. Subhuman captives collapse to their knees because the divine figure belongs to their faith. A glowing rune settles onto Ashina while cold power transforms her weakened body. She grows taller, her skin pales like snow, and her red eyes sharpen. The frightened slave emerges as a first-rank god-chosen warrior. Field forms a territorial contract with her and immediately destroys her slave agreement. Ashina becomes a free citizen of Nightfall Domain rather than property under divine threat. Her rune summons a black dragon wolf armored in dark scales. The beast radiates freezing energy and rivals a third-rank combat knight by itself. Ashina also gains cavalry techniques, extreme cold attacks, and a charge-enhancing divine skill. The witnessing slaves stop seeing Field as a doomed fool abandoned by his family. They now believe the gods themselves may support his impossible northern campaign. Field promises freedom and decent lives to those who work faithfully beside him. With morale transformed, he enters Baron Bull's abandoned outer fortress under lantern protection. Ashina decapitates armored corpses before her dragon wolf burns an approaching crowd to ash. The battle ends so quickly that many slaves never manage to swing their weapons. Deeper inside, they discover surviving soldiers hiding behind a purified bunker door. Their bearded officer recognizes Field as the famously generous noble without guards. Believing kindness equals helplessness, the soldiers decide to murder and rob their rescuer. Ashina tears an attacker's arm away before the dragon wolf fills the corridor. Field offers 1 silver coin for every hostile soldier his slaves personally kill. Desperation changes instantly into aggression as captives realize violence can purchase survival. The mutineers fall beneath divine power, farming blades, and newly awakened ambition. Their bunker contains armor shields, crossbows, sabers, halberds, and enormous arrow supplies. Enough equipment waits there to outfit 500 soldiers from head to toe. Field arms his followers and Pride straightens bodies previously bent by chains. He sends Wildcat with 20 disguised men to collect supplies from nearby villages. Using Baron Bull's banner, they seize livestock, grain coins, and badly needed provisions. Another bunker yields fog-clearing lanterns and healing potions worth hundreds of gold coins. Field announces that slaves may earn freedom by paying 1 gold coin from rewards. For people who once owned nothing, that rule creates a future worth fighting toward. Before Imperial forces notice the plunder, the expedition prepares to enter the Grey North. Beyond Kashin Fortress waits poisoned soil, endless corpses, and silence deeper than any grave. Field lights a precious lantern and leads his transformed followers into the death fog. The cursed province closes around them, but they are no longer entering it helpless. Gray fog smothers sunlight sound, and every comforting sign that the living world still exists. Corrupted tendrils coil across the road and repeatedly catch beneath the wagon wheels. Rusted spears display shriveled heads beside banners left by failed imperial armies. Field walks at the front because a frightened leader would shatter everyone behind him. Strange howls travel through the mist, while the lantern illuminates only 100 paces. Ashina suddenly raises her bow and fires toward a shape emerging from the right. Her arrow punches through a corpse's skull and bursts it apart before anyone reacts. The system map immediately fills with red skulls approaching from several directions. Field orders the carts drawn into a defensive circle and distributes the stolen crossbows. Few followers know archery, but anyone can point a crossbow and pull its trigger. 20 nervous shooters form behind the wagons as a black wave enters the light. The first volley drops the leading corpses as though they struck an invisible wall. Ashina summons her dragon wolf and charges directly into the center of the horde. Her blade flashes between gray bodies while massive claws crush everything beneath them. Blue fire erupts outward and reduces dozens of corrupted creatures to drifting ash. Wildcat's armored guards hold formation, thrusting halberds through anything reaching the carts. Their stolen armor turns deadly claws into ringing impacts against solid plate. Field's map suddenly marks a fast-moving enemy directly above his position. He throws himself from the saddle before talons cut through the empty air. A hairless Batwoman circles overhead with winged arms and razor-edged feet. She snatches one female slave upward and tears her body apart above the formation. Blood rains over the defenders while the creature shrieks with corrupted amusement. Field orders every crossbow raised and several bolts punch through her wings. She crashes beside the carts where his halberd caves in her skull. The distraction allows corpses to flood an exposed section of the defensive ring. Ashina's dragon wolf answers with enough blue fire to bake men inside their armor. When the flames fade, 3 slaves and 1 guard lie dead among blackened remains. Field grants a brief rest while exhausted women recover arrows from ruined bodies. He thanks Ashina, and her wagging tail betrays how deeply the praise affects her. Before they move again, 19 organized red marks appear at the map's edge. Their formation is too disciplined for corrupted beasts. Field sends Ashina into the fog and quietly prepares the column for another betrayal. Captain Connor emerges with the same cavalrymen who supposedly returned toward civilization. They have circled back to murder Field, steal his lanterns, and blame the fog. Connor expects frightened slaves, weak servants, and one helpless noble begging for mercy. Instead, he finds armored infantry behind carts with loaded crossbows aimed at his chest. The captain attempts to retreat, but the dragon wolf appears across the road behind him. His terrified horse throws him before Ashina places a spear against his throat. She takes his lantern, leaving every cavalryman dependent on Field for survival. Connor recognizes the former slave and realizes she has awakened as a god chosen. Field approaches, pleasantly pretending the armed men have returned out of loyal concern. The trapped captain eagerly accepts that excuse because the alternative is immediate death. Field offers wheat beer and encourages every rider to dismount beside the wagons. Once their horses are secured, Connor asks permission to leave and receives none. The dragon wolf bites through one rider's head, ending every remaining illusion. Connor collapses and confesses that Field's second sister Liz ordered the assassination. Field gives the traitors a choice between scouting through the fog or dying immediately. They enter the front of the column exactly where approaching corpses will strike first. For 3 days, the system map guides the expedition around the largest enemy concentrations. Smaller hordes remain unavoidable, and Connor's men disappear one by one beneath them. By the time Star Knight Manor appears, only Connor remains alive and partially corrupted. Ashina grants him a quick death before the slaves efficiently empty his pockets. The expedition reaches the manor gates with cheers of relief and exhausted disbelief. Without Field's map and Ashina's power, none of them would have crossed the province. Ashina removes corrupted thorns, accidentally pulling the rusted gates completely from their hinges. Beyond them stretches an enormous estate once owned by Baroness Sophia Starnight. Statues, ornamental gardens, villas, pools, vineyards, barns, and forests fill the grounds. Even under corruption, the property displays wealth accumulated through many noble generations. Field compares an old estate plan with his system map before choosing their first objective. The central mansion contains countless skull markers and one enormous presence beneath the basement. A pressure like unseen eyes settles across Field's chest when he studies its broken windows. Whatever occupies that building is stronger than anything his group has faced. He refuses to approach it and selects the southeastern winery as their temporary base. Brick and stone have preserved the structure better than the estate's wooden buildings. The surrounding vineyards now contain writhing flesh, black tendrils, and eyeball-covered growths. Those creatures appear horrifying but remain mostly harmless unless allowed to spread pollution. Field offers copper rewards for clearing the land quickly, and hesitation disappears instantly. Free villagers complain that the soil leaks purple poison and can never support crops. Wildcats guards silently draw their swords, reminding everyone how little patience survival permits. Field punishes the loudest complainer, then sends the others toward the eastern fields. Inside the winery, footsteps multiply above them before twisted workers rush from the darkness. Field forbids Ashina from using fire because the building may contain valuable flammable supplies. Armored guards create a shield line while halberds stab through the advancing corpses. Ashina and her dragon wolf hold the center without damaging the stone structure. One guard falls beneath several creatures, but Field cuts through and pulls him upright. The rescued man stares in disbelief because nobles rarely risk themselves for common soldiers. Field reminds the guards that freedom and even knighthood remain possible through service. His intervention transforms fear into aggression, and they clear more than 70 enemies. Deeper inside, the group finds a Batwoman corpse opened from throat to abdomen. Corrupted grain wriggles across the floor, suggesting the fog changes living matter profoundly. A new skull symbol flashes across Field's map too quickly for any warning. Something smashes through a raised shield and launches its bearer across the room. The attacker resembles a gigantic hairless rat with enormous claws and hardened flesh. Its first swipe would kill Field, but the dragon wolf curls protectively around him. Sparks burst from black scales while only two small patches break beneath the impact. The wolf hurls the creature across the room, yet ordinary weapons barely scratch it. One sweeping limb sends several armored guards crashing against walls and broken equipment. Field recognizes a third-rank corrupted monster far beyond his followers' normal strength. Ashina drives her spear into its body, while the dragon wolf strikes like a charging wagon. The impact exposes its chest and creates the opening she needs. Blue starlight coils around Ashina's weapon and forms a roaring spear of frozen energy. She hurls it through the monster, liquefying flesh and scattering bone fragments across the chamber. Victory leaves Ashina pale and breathless, but the surrounding skull markers finally vanish. Field rewards her with the final deer steak, instantly restoring her food-obsessed enthusiasm. They sweep the remaining rooms and carry the wounded outside for treatment. The winery is cracked, foul-smelling, and partly collapsed, yet its main structure remains usable. Field descends into the cellar expecting ruined grain-broken barrels and more disappointment. Instead, sealed oak barrels sit beneath rubble beyond the reach of living corruption. A guard opens one, releasing the unmistakable fragrance of preserved black pearl wine. This imperial luxury disappeared when the northern province fell 10 years earlier. Nobles would pay fortunes for even a bottle, while Field has discovered entire barrels. The winery suddenly becomes more than shelter. It may finance the rebirth of Nightfall. Field establishes control over the building and the land immediately surrounding it. His people burn corrupted growths while using broken timber for fuel and temporary repairs. During inspection, he observes how sharply servants, slaves, and free villagers live differently. He decides obedience will earn decent treatment, though weakness will never again control him. Field gathers his tiny household staff and learns several names he previously ignored. Chow serves as butler, while Claypot, Plate, Scissors, and Sparrow handle daily duties. Their plain names reflect a society reserving elegance and identity for powerful families. Field rewards Claypot for preparing a comfortable wagon bed during the journey. One silver coin makes the young servant kneel with overwhelming gratitude. A monthly performance bonus soon turns the household into a competition for recognition. Chow objects when Field promises equal opportunities to human and subhuman workers. Field answers that Nightfall will follow its own laws because old customs offer only ruin. That night he reduces his development strategy to two essential actions. Nightfall must plunder abandoned wealth and explore every surviving location around it. Ashina joins him privately and admits she has no education or management experience. Before enslavement, she was merely the daughter of a hunter. Field promises to teach her because divine power alone cannot build a functioning territory. He then reveals that his eventual target is the brother who murdered Field's beloved. Ashina supports the decision because she has witnessed his restraint and unusual fairness. Field intends to train raiding cavalry using the horses Connor's traders conveniently provided. The next morning, every inhabitant gathers before a chest overflowing with coins. Field personally pays 1 silver coin for each corpse killed during previous battles. Ironhammer receives 17 silver coins, more wealth than many commoners see in years. Those who refused combat watch with regret while successful guards openly weep. Field explains that 1 earned gold coin will purchase freedom and citizenship. Farming, construction, repairs, scouting, and fighting will all provide paid opportunities. His second law forbids racial discrimination within Nightfall domain. Human or subhuman, anyone who works faithfully will receive equal protection and reward. Ashina struggles to control her emotions while hearing a noble defend her people publicly. Field's third rule requires daily prayers, including Ashina, because faith strengthens God chosen. He dislikes depending on religion, but survival leaves no room for unnecessary experiments. Military recruitment opens with meals and bounty payments instead of wages. This time, desperate volunteers push forward because they have witnessed rewards become real. Field makes them run 5 laps and rejects cheaters regardless of their desperation. The final recruit crosses the finish line almost unconscious, proving determination beyond strength. 23 candidates join the expanding guard force. Field combines subhuman veterans with recruits to create 20 mounted raiders. 33 remaining guards become the defensive infantry assigned to protect the winery. Chow considers arming enslaved people madness and recommends professional mercenaries instead. Field rejects soldiers who would abandon him whenever an enemy offers better payment. He believes ordinary people fight hardest when victory determines their own future. That afternoon, the new guards enter the fog for practical training against weaker corpses. Their first 7 enemies trigger shaking hands, wet clothing, and desperate hesitation. Veterans pin 1 creature, while Wildcat coaches a recruit through his first killing thrust. The young man finally stabs with closed eyes and collapses afterward from terror. Once 1 recruit succeeds, the others follow and destroy the remaining corpses. The patrol reaches Rum Village, where clustered skull markers behave strangely on Field's map. They discover corrupted bodies repeating grotesque instincts, despite complete physical decay. Embarrassed laughter unexpectedly breaks the oppressive fear hanging over the inexperienced soldiers. Ashina burns the entire mass while Ironhammer crushes surviving creatures beneath his shield. The guards advance into the village, their footsteps gradually falling into a shared rhythm. The synchronized movement steadies new recruits and begins forming real military confidence. Field establishes the lantern near the village well and permits a brief rest. Moments later, hundreds of fast-moving skulls flood the system map from every direction. Running would place the group directly before the approaching wave, so Field chooses defense. A corrupted monkey vaults over a wall and bites hard enough to bend armor. Ashina cuts it apart, but hundreds more pour across the ruins behind it. Crossbows tear gaps through the swarm, while the dragon wolf burns a path southeast. The defenders reach a courtyard and barricade the gate using stone and rotten furniture. Endless monsters strike the shield wall, but their migration carries them past rather than inward. Ashina's dragon wolf blocks the entrance like an armored furnace beneath a mountain of bodies. After 30 brutal minutes, the horde finally moves beyond the ruined settlement. Exhausted guards thank Ashina without the suspicion they once directed toward her race. Shared danger has accomplished what Field's laws alone could never force. Scavenging teams recover cookware, broken furniture coins, and every useful piece of wood. Ashina also discovers green sprouts glowing with magical energy inside a protected courtyard. Field touches one and immediately inhales a powerful scent released from its leaves. His pulse races, his judgment collapses, and his body reacts beyond conscious control. He grabs Ashina before burying his face against her neck under the plant's influence. She restrains her divine strength while struggling to protect both of them from injury. After breaking free, she purges the effect with focused, God-chosen energy. Field awakens without memory, while Ashina's burning face reveals something deeply embarrassing occurred. She explains enough to leave him mortified and refuses to let him touch another sprout. Field still recognizes practical value because the plant could accelerate livestock breeding. The promise of unlimited future meat convinces Ashina to collect several samples carefully. Their remaining loot is poor, but the strange plant may become more valuable later. Upon returning, Field finds the winery farmland cleared of corrupted flesh and tendrils. The workers expect payment, and he honors every promised copper coin. Repairing the winery becomes the next obstacle because nobody possesses skilled craftsmanship. Nightfall contains no carpenter, stonemason, blacksmith, engineer, or experienced builder. Guild-controlled craftsmen elsewhere would never willingly relocate into a cursed province. Field decides he must personally recruit them from Maple City in High Fort Province. He also creates a marketing story presenting the recovered wine as monster-guarded treasure. A barrel found beside demons sounds far more valuable than one discovered beneath rubble. While workers clear the winery, invisible power suddenly flows through Field's entire body. His system identifies him as a first-rank lord controlling the winery and surrounding farmland. The territory holds more than 200 inhabitants but suffers terrible environmental corruption. Field receives prosperity, Field an ability capable of permanently pushing back the death fog. Ashina's contract also grants beast taming and the power to upgrade wolf cavalry. Field orders every fog-clearing lantern extinguished, despite immediate panic around him. The gray mist stops at the territory's edge and cannot advance another step. Celebration erupts because their survival no longer consumes one costly lantern every month. Field distributes extra meat, soup, and bread, converting financial relief into public morale. Later, he studies an explorer's journal describing earlier expeditions through the cursed north. The author's reckless observations provide fragments of useful knowledge beneath absurd personal commentary. A sudden scream interrupts Field's reading, though his map displays no corrupted enemies. Claypot reports armed raiders have killed 2 slaves and abducted a woman. The attackers retreated through the fog, proving they are intelligent and adapted to it. Field initially fears assassins sent by his family after discovering Ashina's existence. Examination of the wounds suggests much shorter attackers rather than human cavalry or knights. Ashina's dragon wolf follows their scent northeast into a dense, corrupted forest. The abducted woman has already died from fog exposure and suffered further abuse afterward. Field and Ashina ambush more than 30 pale-eyed goblins resting near her body. These creatures have evolved yellow skin and resistance, allowing them to live within corruption. Ashina's dragon wolf crashes through them while her spear pierces several bodies per thrust. Field kills fleeing enemies from the wolf's back and deliberately leaves one alive. The terrified survivor runs directly toward its hidden tribe. Roughly 100 goblins occupy a camp concealed behind corrupted thorn growth. Their chief descends from beastmen forces trapped when Imperial fog destroyed the northern population. Field orders total elimination because survivors would continue raiding his undefended settlement. Blue fire sweeps through the camp while Ashina shoots down every organized counterattack. The goblins die beneath flames, arrows, claws, and collapsing thorn shelters. A search reveals no young goblins, proving another breeding den must exist nearby. They discover one beneath the bushes containing numerous infants and corrupted animal mothers. Field understands the tribe can reproduce rapidly by exploiting creatures altered by the fog. Leaving them alive would allow another hostile population to emerge within weeks. After destroying the den, Ashina tears a lock from an old chest using bare hands. Inside lie faded military banners and more than 20 sealed magical scrolls. Field tests one fire scroll and produces only enough flame to burn nearby remains. The unimpressive result still proves the remaining scrolls can be sold for substantial gold. Nightfall's residents celebrate when Field returns carrying proof that their attackers are dead. A lord avenging murdered slaves is so unusual that gratitude becomes genuine loyalty. The raid also exposes disastrous guard discipline and sleeping patrols. Rather than cripple starving soldiers with lashes, Field punishes them through armored running drills. Smoked meat turns their complaints into frantic effort, while reliable guards receive rewards directly. He introduces posture training from his previous world and promises eggs for proper endurance. Even strong men shake beneath the unfamiliar exercise while imagining the promised food. Chow mistakes the training for creative torture and approves for entirely incorrect reasons. His completed inventory reveals preserved beer mead, olive wine, and black pearl barrels. One rare, sparkling barrel makes the cellar far richer than Field expected. Because monsters could destroy everything overnight, he decides to sell part of the stock immediately. Field prepares an expedition toward Maple City with wine scrolls, cavalry, and trusted guards. Ashina remains essential because her dragon wolf can break through corpse waves along the road. The system map guides them around the largest hordes, while mounted raiders destroy smaller groups. They finally cross High Fort's border and emerge from gray death into sunlight and clean air. One day later, Maple City's flowers, pleasure houses, merchants, and crowds surround the convoy. Field enters Baron Simon's decadent estate carrying 10 barrels and a carefully prepared monster story. Before the night ends, his recovered wine is ready to transform Nightfall's survival into fortune. Baron Simon tastes the recovered black pearl wine and immediately loses all restraint. Field's exaggerated tale of a demon-guarded cellar has multiplied the wine's perceived value. Simon buys all 10 barrels and even purchases the giant rat monster's skull. The transaction produces more than 5,000 gold coins in a single afternoon. Field deposits most of the fortune inside Maple City's imperial vault for protection. Simon then attempts to lure him toward the exquisite dancer Maple City's seductive god chosen. Field recognizes the trap and changes the subject before pleasure becomes political imprisonment. He asks Simon to locate giant wolves suitable for Nightfall's future cavalry. Ashina's contract can strengthen 50 wolf riders, but Field currently owns no suitable mounts. Simon agrees to search through distant nomadic merchants, expecting another profitable transaction later. After Field leaves, the exquisite dancer expresses personal interest in the unusual young baron. She recommends inviting him to an underground masked ball designed to expose every weakness. Simon doubts Field will survive another 3 months inside the corrupted North. Neither understands that the system map changes his chances completely. With his financial crisis temporarily solved, Field turns towards supplies and skilled workers. Nightfall's damaged soil cannot feed its population without livestock trade and agricultural recovery. His territory also contains almost no literate administrators or experienced craftsmen. Field visits a crowded tavern where noble clothing silences every conversation around him. Generous tips relax the patrons and the bartender begins sharing useful local information. Someone has reported thousands of armor sets stolen from Baron Bull's fortress. The investigator clearly inflated the number, making a serious search for the true thief unlikely. Another rumor concerns a powerful mind-controlling artifact stolen from the Imperial Palace. Field avoids that distant danger and asks instead for honest people with practical abilities. The bartender recommends Tate, a former prison warden ruined for refusing corruption. Tate can read, write, manage prisoners, and recognize criminal behavior. He refuses Field's first offer because moving his family north appears suicidal. Field reminds him that corrupt officials and local gangs already threaten everyone he loves. A death zone without those enemies may actually offer greater security than Maple City. After testing Tate's knowledge, Field offers triple salary and a gold signing bonus. Tate agrees to bring his wife, mother, and daughter to the inn by noon. Field next searches for Grey Dog, a carpenter known for exceptional work. Unfortunately, Grey Dog has already joined a merchant named Kutch. Kutch serves Adrian Rose, the brother who murdered Field's beloved and celebrated his exile. When Kutch sees Field alive, fear briefly destroys his polished merchant expression. The Rose family has already declared Field dead and emptied his old room. They even held a celebration disguised as mourning after he entered Nightfall. Kutch quickly pretends delight and claims Adrian frequently speaks about his missing brother. Field requests Grey Dog after Kutch carelessly offers assistance. The merchant refuses through excuses about Adrian needing a new stable. Field responds with deliberate weakness, allowing Kutch and his son Lance to mock him. They believe the old, obedient Field has survived without changing. Kutch plans to warn Adrian because Field still possesses inheritance rights. At the church, Field attempts to purchase lanterns and purification potions. A large-nosed customer suddenly outbids him using money secretly supplied by Lance. The prank is designed to follow Field through the city and ruin every purchase. Field notices the scheme and quietly sends a guard to arrange a different response. At the Mage Guild, he sells the recovered scrolls for 150 gold coins. The old chief mage explains that ancient magic usually weakens instead of improving with age. The large-nosed man appears again as Field pretends interest in expensive spellbooks. Field repeatedly selects items while his rival outbids him using Adrian's merchant credit. The chief mage recognizes Field's signals and willingly continues the escalating game. Soon the foolish buyer owes 1,300 gold coins for books he never wanted. Field concedes with convincing frustration and leaves before the trap closes. The buyer attempts to return everything, but the chief mage refuses immediate refunds. Only Adrian himself can reverse purchases made through his noble account. Outside, hired street killers surround the large-nosed man beneath a fabricated accusation. Rusted knives open his throat and cut down the escorts carrying his purchases. Field's soldiers calmly recover the horses, spellbooks, lanterns, and purification potions. Lance watches from across the street as his expensive joke becomes a bloody disaster. Field meets his eyes, smiles, and draws one finger slowly across his own throat. The operation gains nearly 2,000 gold coins in goods purchased with Adrian's money. Kutch understands that accusing a noble of murder would destroy a commoner's entire family. He flees Maple City before dawn, intending to report Field's survival personally. His caravan does not travel far before 20 black-cloaked riders surround it. Silverclaw's raiding cavalry circles the wagons while Kutch orders resistance. A second-rank combat knight named Gareth rides forward with complete confidence. One trained knight could normally destroy Field's inexperienced cavalry almost alone. Then Ashina's dragon wolf appears upon the ridge and shakes Gareth's combat aura. Even a first-rank combat god chosen can kill knights ranked far above ordinary soldiers. Gareth charges anyway because retreat would destroy his honor and future career. White aura wraps around his horse and lance as he strikes hard enough to crater earth. Ashina has already moved aside her enormous mount, crossing distance almost invisibly. While they clash, Silverclaw leads the cavalry directly into Kutch's defensive line. Hired workers holding crossbows are pushed forward as human shields. Their scattered bolts bounce from stolen plate armor with harmless metallic sounds. Field's riders crash through before the crossbows can reload. Lances tear apart the front line while terrified laborers trample Kutch's own guards. Wolf's subhuman cavalrymen draw sabers and cut downward from the moving saddle. Their weeks of fighting corpses have removed nearly every hesitation against human enemies. Gareth survives several exchanges before Ashina releases a river of starlit spear thrusts. His squires die simultaneously while the dragon wolf bites through Gareth's armored body. The remaining guards collapse beneath cavalry pressure and their own panicking workers. Field loses no soldiers, though several riders suffer injuries from poor horsemanship. He promises complete treatment and pays 1 silver coin for every defeated enemy. Silverclaw drags Kutch and Lance before their hooded commander. Field reveals himself and both prisoners finally understand who planned everything. Under painful persuasion, Lance describes Adrian's military strength in detail. Adrian possesses hundreds of soldiers, numerous ranked knights, and thousands of potential militia. His greatest weapon is Allison, the second-rank flame spirit butterfly god chosen. She commands supernatural magic and can cast destructive spells with exceptional speed. Fortunately, Adrian is new to rule and controls only part of his inherited forces. Most powerful knights remain loyal to Count Rose rather than his unstable son. Field still cannot challenge that territory openly without building far greater strength. He calmly announces forgiveness and turns his horse away from the prisoners. Silverclaw understands the hidden order and cuts both men down immediately. Field forgave them personally, but he never promised protection from his soldiers. Among the surviving workers, Grey Dog hides beneath vegetables inside an overturned cart. Field recruits the carpenter along with everyone possessing even remotely useful skills. The captured caravan contains a far greater prize than laborers or construction tools. 60 combat aura potions rest inside a protected wooden chest. Knights require those valuable medicines to strengthen their supernatural fighting power. Additional loot includes gold healing potions, silk horses' armor, and Gareth's weapons. The total value approaches another 5,000 gold coins. One rapid cavalry ambush has earned nearly as much as the dangerous wine expedition. Field returns to the inn where Tate waits after selling his family home. Tate's mother, wife, and daughter accompany him into their uncertain northern future. Field purchases 300 additional slaves, mostly weak men and elderly workers. He also buys food, livestock, furniture, clothing, pack horses, and carrier pigeons. Tate immediately organizes the enlarged caravan more efficiently than Chow ever managed. At the border, Field discovers a church expedition of holy knights and robed nuns. Their leader is Eliza, a third-rank god chosen carrying the symbol of holy light. She proposes building a church and permanent military camp inside Nightfall Domain. Field recognizes that such protection would place his territory beneath church control. He politely refuses while requesting gold and lanterns instead. Their smiling negotiation ends without either side obtaining the influence or resources desired. Eliza reveals the church is searching for divine artifacts left by God chosen who died north. Field offers help in exchange for supplies, but she refuses to share either information or equipment. They separate politely, each understanding the other remains useful and potentially dangerous. Field leads more than 300 people back into the gray fog. The huge caravan moves slowly enough to attract corpse hordes from every ruined direction. Tate nearly panics until he notices Field's cavalry carries fresh human blood on its weapons. He quickly decides that obedience is safer than either monsters or attempted escape. Ashina reveals her dragon wolf and destroys the first horde before the newcomers. The frightened slaves finally understand their lord controls a hidden god chosen. Corpse activity has increased drastically since Field last crossed this route. Ashina burns one wave only for another to emerge immediately through the fog. By the time the winery appears, 39 travelers and several animals have died. Tate's family collapses outside the crumbling building after seeing their promised new home. Field describes the territory honestly as a prison whose walls are made from death fog. Tate's role is assigning labor, preventing riots, and transforming slaves into functioning citizens. Despite the brutal journey, the settlement has remained safe during Field's absence. Purified fields are already being worked with bare hands and primitive farming tools. Residents abandon their work and rush forward when Field returns alive. Chow nearly weeps because Field's death would remove the protection holding back corruption. The territory now has 3 months of supplies, more livestock, and several useful recruits. Ashina appears exhausted after days of continuous fighting, yet satisfaction moves through her ears. Guards stand perfectly upright when praised, having learned their lord values military posture. Field grants them several days of rest before beginning the next stage of development. Tate refuses rest and immediately inspects population housing, food, and security conditions. He asks which taxes and production targets should receive priority. Field answers that meaningless quotas cannot repair a society without foundations. First, they must reclaim land and buildings from corruption. Second, they must rehabilitate slaves into trained workers and eventually free citizens. Tate understands prisons and the hidden hierarchies created among desperate people. Field warns that suffering never automatically makes someone honest or compassionate. Strong slaves already bully weaker captives whenever guards are absent. Tate is surprised by management principles unknown among ordinary feudal nobles. Field's knowledge from Earth treats investment in people as obvious rather than revolutionary. Housing remains impossible until they control forests, stone tools, and skilled builders. The following morning, Ashina appears in a lace-trimmed dress purchased from Maple City. Her relaxed posture and bright expression contrast sharply with the starving captive Field first met. She asks whether they will search for another hidden treasure. Field instead begins inspecting the workers and discovers his sanitation law has completely failed. Human waste covers paths, corners, and open ground throughout the settlement. Chow explains that warnings mean nothing when hundreds of people each receive several chances. Field replaces patience with immediate fines or lashes for public defecation. He orders waste collected, decomposed, and eventually used as fertilizer. Old Turtledove, an experienced farmer, reacts as though Field has proposed poisoning the goddess. Chow insists only prayer and divine magic can improve crop yields. Field realizes real supernatural power has discouraged practical experimentation across this world. He orders slave fields to use compost planting ridges and deeper tilling. Free villagers may continue traditional methods, creating a direct comparison after harvest. Ashina hopes the new farming method might somehow produce meat instead of vegetables. Field next confronts Plate's habit of combining fruit with nearly every cooked dish. He personally directs the cook through a dry beef recipe using oil, vegetables, and spices. Meanwhile, slaves stampede toward generous bread and porridge rations outside. Well-fed guards force them into orderly lines and punish anyone attempting to cut ahead. Sparrow catches free villagers trying to reduce portions given to smaller slaves. Her authority, supported by armed guards, forces the distributors to obey Field's exact rule. Twin girls named White Feather and Black Feather secretly save half their bread. Their lives have taught them that generous meals disappear without warning. Field's servants initially insult the unfamiliar beef dish before devouring it completely. Even Ashina can only raise a thumb because her mouth is packed with food. These small improvements reveal a territory becoming functional despite fear, poverty, and constant danger. Field intends to rest for 3 days, but anxiety drives him back to work early. Ashina has already spent the morning clearing corpses alone beyond the protected border. She reports that something watched nightfall during the deepest hours of the night. The unknown presence carried unfamiliar scent, murderous intent, and an ability to evade her. Goblins and ordinary corrupted creatures cannot hide from her enhanced senses. Ashina recommends larger patrols, signal horns, and stronger defensive procedures immediately. Her concern matters because even third-rank monsters have never made her visibly uneasy. Field assigns Tate to recruit more guards while he investigates the eastern lumber yard. Without timber, the winery cannot receive walls housing repairs or defensive towers. Field, Ashina, Wildcat, and veteran guards cross corrupted forest toward a blackened lake. The soldiers now kill scattered corpses with quiet precision instead of terrified screaming. Wildcat traps limbs, breaks skulls, and coordinates attacks like a trained professional. Field practices lance charges while Ashina corrects his cavalry technique from beside him. Near the river, faint human cries call repeatedly for help through the fog. Field's map shows only enemies across the water, while Ashina smells nothing alive. They refuse the bait and send Ashina forward to clear the stone bridge. A huge, corrupted crocodile explodes from beneath the water near a purple flower. Its tail craters the riverbank, but Ashina pierces its body and splits its skull. The dragon wolf drags the carcass ashore while corrupted fish crawl toward its blood. Ashina preserves the mysterious flower but forbids Field from smelling another magical plant. The repeated cry leads them toward a lumber yard surrounded by a dense corpse horde. Ashina lures the creatures into open ground and burns them without damaging the timber. The yard contains workshops, worker housing, storage buildings, and enormous usable wood supplies. The voice continues screaming from an empty building, freezing even veteran guards with superstition. Beneath the carpet, Ashina finds a hidden trapdoor, releasing an overwhelming blood stench. The basement contains murdered women arranged around a ritual circle. A magical recording repeatedly shows a nun being mutilated during a dark ceremony. Ashina identifies the victim as a god-chosen murdered for unknown purposes. A flawless silver brooch rests on the central corpse despite years of corruption. It is a first-rank divine artifact, formed from divine power remaining after death. The church expedition was almost certainly searching for treasures exactly like this. Field claims the artifact under territorial law and bonds it using his blood. The silver iris brooch allows him to alter visible appearance, body shape, and voice. It can also transform into a hidden silver longsword, though its full power remains inaccessible. Field tests the illusion by copying Ashina, perfectly shocking and irritating her. The disguise cannot change scent, heartbeat, or physical structure, but its strategic value is enormous. He takes the recording stone as evidence and orders every murdered woman buried properly. While planning how to transport the lumber, Field notices movement at the map's edge. The enormous red presence once buried beneath Starnight Manor is no longer underground. It has reached Nightfall's border with a sudden swarm of corrupted creatures. Field sends Ashina racing back on the dragon wolf while his guards abandon the timber. Warning horns sound as hundreds of settlers stampede toward the stone winery. Wooden training forts channel the first corpse wave into narrow killing lanes. Iron Hammer leads armored guards toward an enemy with one grotesquely enlarged arm. Behind that creature, the escaped presence advances with an army large enough to consume everything Field has built. Nightfall's first true siege begins as Field races home to defend his living territory.